if he keeps doing this, he might turn out to be another Antonio Brown to where he might just become too much of a head case and too much of a problem to where no team's going to want him. We're back with Football Forecast Offseason Edition, Episode 8. He's Kaynen Buckshot. I'm Anthony Balester. We got a lot to get into, Kaynen. A lot of stories that broke just recently. NFL prospect from Texas, Isaiah Bond. He's caught in some trouble, potentially. We never know. Tyreek Hill involved with the police again. Aaron Rodgers. That story is never ending and continuing. We got some retirements. We got some mock drafts. And we got plenty more to break down. But definitely first, make sure to be following us on all social media at TFB Forecast ETB. Also, make sure to be watching and subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. We're very, very close to the 1,000 subscribers. We just passed the 920 mark recently. So please make sure you subscribe. If you like sports, you like football, you're definitely going to want to subscribe. Also, make sure to check out the ETB Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com. We have plenty of shows out there, baseball, basketball, MMA. So definitely make sure to check us out and listen to us however you listen to us, whether you listen to us on the go or you watch us on your television. Listen to us however you listen to the show. And also, the Football Forecast is presented by Playback, and there'll be plenty more to speak about Playback later in the show. How are you doing this week, Kaynen?
I'm doing good, Anthony. How are you, man?
Not too bad. Kind of a little heartbroken in the college basketball world. I'm a huge Duke fan and kind of had my heart ripped out. But that's a different sport for a different day. But we had some crazy stories, Kaynen. One that just broke today and one that we did not have, in the list of topics today. And we got to make it probably the lead now. And that's what is going on with Isaiah Bond, wide receiver out of Texas. He was a very, very talented receiver. Started his career off at Alabama and then transferred to Texas and was supposed to be the guy. Obviously, Matthew Golden had his breakout season, became the guy. But Isaiah Bond was still contributing. He was still a talented guy, and he's still a guy that has speed. He was a guy who, during this draft process was clocked in the 4.3s. So a lot of teams have been interested in this guy, Kaynen, and, been considering this guy as a second or third round draft pick. Well, he was wanted for a sexual assault warrant. Now, he has come out and stated that these are completely false. Obviously, he turned himself in. He was released on bond. So we'll have to see how the legal proceedings go. But whenever you have a sexual assault charge, Kaynen, it's never good. Even when you're proven innocent, unfortunately, it seems to affect you. I mean, you see a guy like Matt Ariza, who had his whole career in front of him with the Buffalo Bills, and he had some charges like this. And obviously, the Bills had to cut him. He was able to, make a comeback and obviously play for the Kansas City Chiefs, but he almost lost his entire career, and it definitely set him back a few years. And now with Isaiah Bond, in one of the most crucial parts of his career, trying to get drafted, trying to, improve his draft stock as much as he can. This is definitely going to hurt that. And I wonder, depending on, how much information, it's a relatively new story that we'll obviously get more news about it as the days go on and more news on it next week. But as of right now, we don't know. And, some teams may just decide, they might just take him off their draft boards completely. And I know my Buffalo Bills, a team that's looking for a speedy receiver in the middle rounds, was considering this guy and brought him in for some visits. So it's definitely disappointing, Kaynen. And as I always say, if he's innocent, my heart goes out to him. It's absolutely a shame that someone would have to lie and put someone's, name and reputation on the line and destroy it, to gain some clout or some money. But if he's guilty, then obviously he deserves all the repercussions and he deserves to not get drafted and maybe potentially lose out in his NFL career. But I know this is a new story, Kaynen, that there's not a lot of information on. But just, your overall thoughts on just seeing this right now. What are your initial thoughts hearing this?
Yeah, like you said, for both sides, it just sucks to hear whether it's true or not. Like, that affects both of them. And, it's just sad that we have to keep hearing these stories pop up in the league. You kind of got to talk about them.
Yeah, and you know what, Kaynen? That's a good point. It seems like not with just athletes, but it just seems like this is a common thing. And whether they're innocent or not, there's always some sort of allegation. We've talked about it with Deshaun Watson. We've talked about it with Justin Tucker, and now we got Isaiah Bond. So, like I said, we're gonna have to see. Is he gonna be Deshaun Watson, where there's enough evidence where he's guilty and he does some sort of settlement, or is he actually not guilty and is he going to be like a Matt Ariza situation where maybe he goes undrafted, he doesn't get to play his rookie season, and then after the legal proceedings prove his innocence, he's able to make a full comeback. But it's absolutely a shame, Kaynen, and I think anybody out there who makes a false allegation like this definitely should, I think, get some repercussions as well. People shouldn't be going out there making these allegations and being able to get away scot-free. So, like I said, Kaynen, if he's guilty, he deserves all the punishment. If he's not guilty, well, I hope he gets found, proven innocent in court. But, my last question, Kaynen, is, given how, we're only a few weeks away from draft day, and, we're not going to probably get enough evidence from now until then. And I know teams, have their guys on the inside, and they're going to dig and try to find as much information. But for a guy who was already looked at as a second and third round pick, do you think within the next 2 weeks, with this story coming out today, do you think his draft stock is going to drop? And you think he's going to be probably looking at probably lower and worse than a second, third round pick at this point?
I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think it probably will drop just because teams don't want like the negative press surrounding them or surrounding him around the team. But I mean, when you got guys like Laramie Tunsil and Jalen Carter, I mean, they found an NFL team fine. So I think we'll be fine at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know. The thing is, Kaynen, he is a young guy. And, the NFL, if you are talented, they will try to figure out a way to make it work. Because at the end of the day, there's billions of dollars at stake, and these teams are trying to win. The further you win and the more you win, the more your team will make money. And the more merchandise you sell and all that. And the more your value of your team goes. So, yeah, obviously teams are going to try to do the best they can, but are some strict teams out there, and I know including Sean McDermott and the Bills, where, when you get any guy like this, they just completely stay away, and they're all about their culture over the players. So it's going to be interesting, Kaynen, how this ultimately ends up playing out. But another player who has a history of being involved with the police has again found himself in the news. And that is the cheetah, Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill now was involved in a domestic dispute. There was reports that he was given divorce papers. But ultimately, I guess he was getting into an argument with a significant other, and they were arguing on a balcony. The balcony is obviously, high up in the air, and they were holding their baby at the time. And obviously, that's very unsafe. Obviously, when you're having a domestic dispute, obviously, tensions are high. You got two grown people, a man and woman, arguing with each other. Anything can happen. And at that point, you got to think about the safety of the kid. But, Tyreek Hill, this is a guy, whether, if she was being rude to him or she started, Tyreek Hill is a guy who has a history of being involved in these certain situations. He's been in situations like this before in domestic disputes, child abusement cases before. So, I don't think Tyreek Hill will get any sort of suspension or anything like that from the league. At most, maybe a fine, but I don't think it's going to come down to that. Obviously, I think it was just a simple argument that maybe escalated and got too far, and they shouldn't have put their kids, in harm's way. But at the end of the day, Kaynen, whether if he's suspended or not, which, like I said, I don't think he'll be, I think Tyreek Hill has to look himself in the mirror, and this is a guy who's constantly getting in trouble outside and off, the football field. And when he's on the football field, he's one of the best receivers in the league. I know he's starting to get up there in age, and he's right around that age where receivers start to decline. So we've probably only got a couple of great years of Tyreek Hill. But what I'm worried about is not the player Tyreek Hill on the field. It's the player off the field. And, Kaynen, if he keeps doing this, he might turn out to be another Antonio Brown, to where he might just become too much of a head case and too much of a problem to where no team's going to want him. So I hope Tyreek Hill could fix that. He's definitely got plenty of time. He hasn't done anything wrong near the level to warrant being kicked out of the league, and being shunned and not signed. But he's definitely on that pathway. But what are your thoughts about Tyreek Hill being in trouble again, Kaynen?
Yeah, like you said, he's been going through a lot of stuff off the field last year, trouble with the police, all that. I hope he gets his stuff together because, like you said, he's a tremendous football player. I mean, he's probably one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen. His speed is just unmatchable. I just hope he gets the help he needs, I guess. Obviously, something's going on. He keeps getting in trouble. And yeah, it's tough. Feel sorry for everyone involved, especially the kid. You know, like you said, should have been a discussion between two adults. They should never put their kid in between that.
Yeah, and Kaynen, Tyreek Hill is a guy who didn't play his best football last year. I know he said he was dealing with some injuries, but if his play on the football field, given his age, continues to go downward, while the off the field issues continue to increase, it's going to get to a point where that is going to start to outweigh it. And you look at a Miami team who is already paying Tua Tagovailoa a lot of money. They're paying Jalen Waddle a lot of money. They might get to the point where they might just want to try to save a few bucks and get out of his deal in a couple of years. Or not give him a contract extension on top of what he already has. They may think, hey, we got this young guy Jalen Waddle. He's squeaky clean off the field. He never gets in trouble. Never says a bad word. We're already paying him and Tua Tagovailoa a lot of money. They might get to the point where it might just be better off to take the Tyreek Hill money and maybe put that on some of your offensive linemen, which they need. But another player, Kaynen, who, he doesn't get in trouble with the law or maybe doesn't do anything that warrants suspensions, but a guy who definitely pisses a lot of people off and continues to like to be in the spotlight and have people constantly talking about where he's going to want to go and what he's going to want to do. And that's the great Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is still undecided on what he's going to do in his future. Right now, they're saying it's probably going to end up being the Pittsburgh Steelers, but right now it seems like Steelers or retirement. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely would want to go to Minnesota, but Minnesota still wants to see how J.J. McCarthy is going to recover from his torn meniscus, and they want to see how he's going to progress in terms of his development. If he, has any sort of, decline or doesn't progress or have a setback, then they'll be interested in Aaron Rodgers. But at this point, at this juncture, J.J. McCarthy has exceeded all their expectations of where he's at in his recovery and his progress. So at this point, they're not interested in Aaron Rodgers. So it's pretty much either the Steelers or retirement. And right now, he hasn't decided yet. I got a feeling he's probably going to decide on draft week. Just so in case they do draft the quarterback, he's like, I'm the starter. So I think he's going to want to, sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers before they draft a quarterback. Now, I still think ultimately Pittsburgh drafts a quarterback either way, because Rodgers is still a 1 to 2 year guy at most. So they're going to want to get a young guy to develop anyways. But, Kaynen, Aaron Rodgers seems to be dragging this out as long as he can. And a lot of people are getting fed up because Aaron Rodgers has a history of doing this. And it seems like he gets off on it because he just likes to be in the limelight. But what are your thoughts on Kaynen, on Aaron Rodgers still undecided on his future?
Yeah, I agree. Minnesota, that would have been a cool spot for Rodgers, kind of completing the Brett Favre arc there, following his footsteps. But I still think he's going to Pittsburgh. That's just the place that makes most sense. They have the most need for a quarterback out of pretty much anyone right now. We saw what they could do last year with Russ. They slipped into that wild card spot. They made it in the playoffs. But you have a tremendous defense, young star at wide receiver. You just signed another, paying him a lot of money. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you need to get your money's worth out of DK and Pickens now. Get someone to throw to them, Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's the last piece that can make that team like really deadly in the playoffs, and they could potentially make a push to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree completely, Kaynen. I really feel like mutually it's the best fit. I think gives Pittsburgh their best chance of getting out of the first round. Maybe not Super Bowl, but definitely the best chance to get in the first round. And also, I think gives Aaron Rodgers the best chance to compete. Obviously, I'm not sure if he just didn't want to go to the Giants or if the Giants decided to look other ways. But the Giants, after signing 2 quarterbacks in Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, they're no longer an option. So, it seems like right now, unless if J.J. McCarthy has a setback with his injury, it seems like it's either Steelers or bust. And I think Aaron Rodgers still has, some good football left in him if he's got the players around him. He can't carry a team no more, but he could definitely play serviceable football if he got the players around him. And I think Pittsburgh could give him that. And I still think he likes, being in the limelight, being in the fame, being on the Pat McAfee show, and still being able to play football. So I still think we got one more year of Aaron Rodgers. And ultimately, Kaynen, it seems like it's going to have to be Pittsburgh. But it's going to be interesting, is he going to decide to do it, before the draft or after the draft? Given Aaron Rodgers' history, I'm going to, go on the side of him doing it before the draft, just so in case they draft a quarterback, he knows, hey, I'm the starter before that guy comes in.
The Football Forecast is presented by Playback. Watching sports is fun, but it's more fun with others. We spend way too much time watching it alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, from repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Now back to the show.
But there was two great players, Kaynen, who retired. And that was Julio Jones and Terron Armstead. Julio Jones, obviously, a guy who's, over the hill, but one of the all-time, greatest receivers, probably one of the top 10 greatest to ever play the game. Should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. When he was playing in his prime, he was always first, second, or third best receiver in football every single year. Obviously, as he got older, he started to have some injuries, and that's usually what happens with big physical receivers. But talk about a guy who was tall at 6'3", almost 6'4", a guy who was strong and muscular, over 220 pounds, a guy who was fast, running a 4.3. So a guy who did it all. It's unfortunate he wasn't able to get a Super Bowl. He came so close in that Super Bowl loss to Tom Brady and the Patriots. But a guy who had a great career, and outside the Super Bowl, really couldn't have any complaints and really couldn't accomplish any more than what he did. And he definitely gave their team the best chance to win the Super Bowl. But a guy like Terron Armstead, that's the one that's the most interesting. He's the guy who still had some good football left in him, but he had some injuries, and I just think he didn't want to play through those injuries anymore. But that's a guy who really rarely hurts the Miami Dolphins. A Miami Dolphins team who has a quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa who, when he's held upright, he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in football. But, if he's not held upright, he's getting hit. It's a recipe for disaster. He gets injured, he's injury prone, and he's a few concussions away from being out of the league. And he's not the biggest guy, so you definitely want to protect him. And you're also talking about a Miami Dolphins team who already had a bad offensive line last year after losing some free agents the year before. So they already had a tough time protecting Tua. And now you just lost your best offensive lineman, your Pro Bowl left tackle, Terron Armstead. So Miami's definitely going to have to draft some offensive linemen early and often in the draft. But what are your thoughts, Kaynen, on these guys retiring?
Yeah, Julio, that's a huge hit to the league. I think that's a lot of everyone's favorite wide receiver, everyone knows his name, everyone talks about him. That's always coming up in top 5 wide receiver conversations. And like you said, he was a future Hall of Famer. There's few other receivers you would want down the field on a deep ball when you need a touchdown other than Julio Jones. His ability, like you said, he had blazing speed, 4.3. He was big. He had a crazy vert. He'd just jump over guys and rip the ball from them. That was awesome to watch, and it's going to suck to see him go because he really was a playmaker. You were always looking for him, whether you're on offense or defense. If you're on offense, you're looking to throw him the ball. If you're on defense, you're making sure he was covered. So that kind of hurts hard a little bit. And the Terron Armstead news, that's kind of sad as well because, like you said, the Dolphins really don't have a good line right now, and he's a Pro Bowl tackle. They could have really used him. It's sad, like you said, especially he had a lot of some football left, but that injury like you said, I don't think he wanted to play through it. He played last season, and yeah, it's going to be tough to see those guys go.
Yeah, I agree. And when the one play that sticks out from Julio Jones, even though they lost, was that catch he made in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. I mean, that sideline catch, when it seemed like that was going to be the end of the game, that was one of the best catches. For him to be able to have, that hand-eye coordination and be able to have that balance to pull it off, that's what made him so special. He was a guy who really didn't have any weaknesses. Big, fast, strong, could block. Great leader, never complained. Outside of the injuries that he had later on, which, like I said, that's common for older receivers, he really didn't have any weaknesses, and that's why he had the luxury career that he did. But now that we're getting closer and closer to the draft, Kaynen, Mel Kiper, one of the top draft experts out there, released what might potentially be his final mock draft. Now, I know a lot of guys release their final mock draft usually the day or at least the week of the draft. Well, Mel Kiper potentially might be releasing his final mock draft this week. Last year at this time, he released his final mock draft about 2 weeks before the draft. So he's doing potentially the same thing. So don't quote me on it. Maybe Mel Kiper will surprise us and we'll get another mock draft in 2 weeks. But right now, this is where he sees it, Kaynen. And, honestly, right now, I kind of agree with a lot of what he had. He's got the Tennessee Titans, going with Cam Ward with the first overall pick. That seems to be a given right now. The Titans seem to be in love with him. So that seems to be the way to go. He's got the Browns taking Travis Hunter. Now, obviously, the Browns can pretty much use anything. It seems like they're going to go best player over best quarterback. So they may not take Shedeur Sanders. So obviously, that's going to come down to either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And according to Mel Kiper, he thinks they're going to decide with Travis Hunter, which obviously leaves, your New York Giants, Kaynen, get an Abdul Carter to pair up with Burns and Thibodeau, giving them one of the most fiercest pass rushers in the NFL. He's got New England going offensive line with Will Campbell, which makes sense. Jaguars getting the interior defensive line, which they need desperately, getting generational defensive tackle Mason Graham. The Raiders getting Ashton Gentry, which we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, how that'd be a perfect fit for the Raiders and Ashton Gentry. Jets building up the offensive line, which they need, with Membo to tackle. Carolina going pass rush, which they desperately need. They had a terrible defense last year. They're getting Jalen Walker, who could play linebacker and edge. And then obviously you got the New Orleans Saints getting Shedeur Sanders, who a lot of guys now have dropping all the way down to the 9th pick. And, a guy who everybody thought was guaranteed to go in the top 3 is now dropping to the 9th pick. And I think that fit could be interesting. To round out the rest of his first round, you had Tyler Warren going to the Bears with a 10th pick. To give Caleb Williams another weapon, that's solid. Dallas, who desperately needs a running back, getting the second best running back in Omari Hampton. That's a great pick. He is going to be one of the best running backs, in the NFL someday. And if it wasn't for Gentry being generational, he would be the top back in the draft. He's got Torrey McMillan, who I think is the top receiver, dropping all the way to Denver with the 20th pick. Rumors about a shoulder injury is what's causing him to drop. Jackson Dart, quarterback, going to the Rams, who obviously you got Matthew Stafford for now, but he is getting up there in age, and they do need a young guy. And Dart is a very talented young quarterback. The Bills getting a cornerback, which is their biggest need, getting Harrison, the very speed corner from Kentucky. Obviously, you got the Chiefs getting Simmons, the tackle, which they desperately need line. Philadelphia adding to that elite pass rush and replacing Josh Sweat with James Pierce Jr. And then some quarterbacks going in the second round. You had Cleveland. He's got Cleveland taking Tyler Shunk to add to their quarterback room, potentially be their future quarterback. And Jalen Milroe, the very talented quarterback who just needs time to develop, going to your New York Giants, Kaynen, in the second round with 34th pick. So he's got some interesting things going here, Kaynen. What are your thoughts about the mock draft?
Yeah, as a Giants fan, that was one of the picks where I'd really like to see it. Milroe, he's obviously a specimen. He runs the ball like only a couple other quarterbacks we've seen. With his frame and speed, I really think he has the opportunity and going and make plays with his feet at the next level. And like you said, he just needs to be polished a little bit because as of right now, people really don't know if he's going to be an elite passer at the next level. But the good thing about that Mel Kiper did mention was Brian Daboll, who kind of polished Josh Allen and made him work with him a little bit. So that'd be really awesome to see those two link up and see what you could get out of Milroe, because what are the Giants going to do at quarterback? I don't think that's a bad move at all. And I think Shador dropping to 9 is due to the Giants picking up quarterbacks ultimately, because they don't. It was either the Giants. I think the Giants were the spot where everyone had them. So with him not going there and Hunter kind of moving into the 2 spot, didn't really think he was going to go there. I kind of predicted Carter to go there. It was kind of weird at first. I didn't like Hunter going there at first, but now that I think about it more, I see more of the upside. The Browns do need help at wide receiver and corner. So if he kind of isn't as good as we thought at the next level at one position, he probably has a spot on the team either way. Regardless, if he does pan out to be what he thinks, it's a great opportunity to showcase the two-way ability. He would be an awesome addition to that defense, buying time for Myles Garrett to get to the quarterback, put the pressure on that we know he's going to get. I liked most of his picks. I thought most of his picks were really good.
Yeah, I agree, Kaynen. You said that perfectly. Yeah, I agree with most of his picks. And with the Giants, getting a developmental quarterback, Brian Daboll probably could get the most. And, you're sitting there thinking, you could either end up with Shador Sanders and then whatever player you get in the second round, or you could get Abdul Carter and Jalen Milroe. And I think a lot of people would take Abdul Carter and Jalen Milroe. With Cleveland, I think they could also use Abdul Carter. You could have another guy opposite Myles Garrett. And I think for the Giants, they really don't need pass rusher, but I just feel like Abdul Carter at that 3rd pick is probably just too good of a player to pass up. And you also said it perfectly, Kaynen, with Shador Sanders dropping, because the Giants aren't going to take a quarterback right now. It seems like they brought 2 guys in. It seems like Cleveland wants to go best player. The Patriots don't need a quarterback. The Jaguars got Trevor Lawrence. The Raiders just gave Geno Smith all that money. Carolina's got Bryce Young. And then you got the Jets. Now, the Jets could have been an interesting option, but they did bring in Justin Fields, and I feel like they want to give Justin Fields a shot. I think they want to build up their offensive line so that if Fields doesn't work out, they have the line so that when they draft their quarterback in 2026, the quarterback doesn't have to worry about a bad offensive line and worried about being a bust. But with Shador Sanders, that is an interesting fit with the Saints. You're talking about pairing him up with a guy in Kellen Moore, who did get a lot out of Jalen Hurts, and he is good with quarterbacks. So he can pair back up with another young quarterback in Shador Sanders. If he's healthy, you do got a number 1 receiver in Chris Olave. You do got one of the best running backs in football when he's healthy in Alvin Kamara. Now, I know they got a very bad salary cap issue, but obviously if you got a young quarterback who's not making much, it can kind of, help make up for the rest of it. So that's definitely an interesting fit. I know Shador Sanders has joked around and kind of been a little cocky, saying, I won't even make it to 6 to the Raiders and things like that. And now ultimately he end up might drop him all the way to 9. I do think Shador Sanders is a great quarterback, Kaynen, and I do think teams are going to be, mistaken for passing up on him. I do think Cleveland should consider him a lot more with the 2nd pick and with their need at quarterback. But obviously, we know with Deshaun Watson, they probably just want to get best player available and just worry about a quarterback a different day. So, or maybe get a quarterback in the 2nd round, like Mel Kiper said. So, there's definitely some interesting picks, and I definitely can't wait for the draft. But speaking of the draft, Kaynen, we have some defensive positions that we haven't been able to preview yet, and we're about to finish doing our draft preview this week. And we got 3 more defensive positions, and we got to start off with our preview for the 2025 NFL Draft linebacker preview. Very, very stacked linebacker group, Kaynen. There's a lot of great guys in here and some first-round potential guys. But before I go in depth on this, Kaynen, what are your thoughts on the top linebackers?
Like you said, really stacked. There was a lot of names to go through, a lot of stats to look up. The first guy I want to talk about is Jahad Campbell. I think he's the first linebacker off my board, or he is the first linebacker off my board, and that seems to be the case with a lot of other people too. He's definitely the most well-rounded linebacker out of this draft. He's exceptional in like all aspects of the game, and that's crucial for the next level. Another thing I like about him, he has the size to stop the run and close the gaps. He has the speed to get to the outside, close off the edge, and he's proven he could even drop into some coverage. That's just a guy he's a do-it-all guy for you. And that's going to be important when he's trying to earn a spot in the NFL next year or this upcoming season. So that'll be really interesting to see if he can get something going. The next linebacker I want to talk about is Demetrius Knight. This guy was awesome. He's another all-around guy. He was initially a quarterback at Georgia Tech, and you could tell he spent time running an offense from his play recognition. I mean, he just gets in there and shuts it down. Having someone like that understands like what needs to happen on offense, having him on defense is crucial because he knows right where to be and what needs to go right, and so he knows just how to stop it. So I really like that guy. He's another guy, like I said, he can do it all. He's all over the field, wrapping guys up, putting pressure on the QB. And I think he even had some interceptions and pass deflections. So I really like those guys. Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, obviously, you're absolutely right, Kaynen. Jahad Campbell is definitely by far the best linebacker in the draft. And I think there's going to be a huge gap between him and the other guys. He's a guy who is a top 10, top 15 overall talent, and maybe even go top 15 overall. And then you're going to probably have another 15 to 25 picks before you see the next linebacker. Like you said, Kaynen, the guy can do it all. And as an Alabama fan, I watched his entire career, and he's a guy who got better each and every year. He's a guy who can pretty much do it all. He's got, the size and athleticism to not only rush the passer, but he's also got, the smarts to, to recognize plays. He's also got the speed and athleticism to cover running backs out the backfield while also having the size and the physicality to cover tight ends. So he's a guy who's an absolute chess piece, and you can just move around all over your defense. Another linebacker who I think is a guy who may slip into the early, slide into the early first round, if not at least in the top second round, guaranteed top 40 pick. That's Carson Schwarzenegger from UCLA. Now, this is another guy who did it all for UCLA, another guy who rushed the passer, stopped the run, covered. And he was a guy who didn't have a lot of talent around him at UCLA. They weren't a very great team. And on defense, he pretty much had to lead their team in tackles, tackle for loss, run stops and sacks, pass defenses. He pretty much had to be relied upon to do everything. And he did it all. And that's why, he's been moving up. And, he's a guy who also has, the size, strength, and athleticism as well to dominate at the next level. He's also got the mentality to just, want to be great. He's also got the mentality to, leave it all on the field in every single play. So you got to love that. And when you pair that up with, the talent and the hard work and how great he is physically and mentally, bar an injury, you're almost guaranteed to get a great player there. I'm glad you brought up Demetrius Knight. That's definitely, a guy, a second, third round pick who very, very talented guy. And, he's still very raw at the position. So he's a guy who's just scratching the surface of his potential and talent. It's going to be interesting to see where his ceiling ultimately ends up being. And then a couple other guys I'll be mentioning is Danny Stotzman. He was the guy who improved every single year, and he's a madman. He's the guy who's going to take your head right off if he hits you. I also like Cody Seidman, who was a really good leader and one of the faces of a great, if not the best defense in all college football for Ohio State. He was a guy who played multiple seasons, played better, didn't transfer, waited his time, and balled out when he needed to. And then lastly, you got Barrett Carter from Clemson, who could have been a second-round pick last year and decided to come back, and he played great as well. So I think there's a lot of great linebackers, Kaynen, and maybe potentially 7 or 8 guys who could be top 100 draft picks. Another position that is pretty, deep in this draft class and has a lot of players, including some generational players, is the cornerback position. This is a great draft class, and if you're a team that desperately needs corner, you're going to love this draft class. So what are your thoughts, Kaynen, about the cornerback class?
Yeah, the first name that comes to mind is Jahdae Barron. He piques my interest a lot because he played reps at the slot and safety in previous seasons, and he did really well. A lot of people said he could have probably got drafted the year before this year, but last season at Texas, he was moved to the perimeter, and he played cornerback 1 pretty much, and he just locked it down. So it's impressive. He has that ability to guard inside or outside, and that's huge for the NFL to be that versatile and already that sound before you're even in the draft. So I think he'll go a long way. He obviously won't be the first one taken off the board because Travis Hunter's there, but I think he might be number 2 off the board for me. And the second guy is Will Johnson out of Michigan. He's super smart, super scrappy. He's just in the right place at the right time a lot. There's been some questions about his top speed, his closing speed, but I think that's kind of like a crazy question because the guy obviously has speed. Corner's a position you have to have speed to play it. You cannot be slow. So besides that, I think he's awesome. He can man up. He can play zone. He's pretty physical. You can't really ask him for much more. But that's it for me, Anthony. What about you? What do you think about the corners?
Yeah, definitely deep class, and we could go on for days. Speaking about how many great players are in this draft at that position, I think Travis Hunter, at cornerback, just like I said at receiver, I think if you line him up at just a receiver, he's the best receiver in the draft class. I think if you line him up as a corner, he's the best corner in the draft class. I think he's a generational corner. With his ball skills, with his knowledge of offense and defense, while also being over 6'2", almost 6'3". I think he actually is close to 6'3". Having that vertical that he has, you can see it on tape. Having the speed he has, which you can see on tape. He's never going to drop an interception. They always say the reason why players play cornerback is because they're receivers that can't catch. Well, obviously that doesn't, factor and apply to Travis Hunter. So obviously he's the best corner, and that's why he's going to go top 3, maybe second overall to the Browns. Will Johnson, who, when the college football season started, was looked at a guy who was a 1A, 1B with Travis Hunter. Obviously he had some injuries, and his tape in 2024 wasn't as good as 2023. But, I ultimately think he's still a great shutdown corner. He's got the size at over 6'2", 190, 195. The only thing they question is his long speed. He obviously didn't run the 40, and they're estimating his 40 time to be about a 4.5. But there has been some great corners who do run a 4.5, like Jalen Johnson and the Bears. So I'm not worried about his long, distance speed. I think he's just a straight-up shutdown corner that he could just be a plug-and-play guy. And I know he had an offseason this year, but even as an offseason for him, which was a down year for him, he still was one of the better cornerbacks in the league when he was on the field. So I still think he's worthy of a top 10 pick. Jahad Barron, like you said, Kaynen, a guy who really broke out this year. And I think he won the award for best defensive back. So this was a guy who really stood out for Texas, was one of the best players in all college football, was one of the faces of one of the best defenses. So, I can see why he's moved up. You got Maxwell Harrison, who a lot of people have the Bills taken, who's a speedy corner, who, still has some things to work on, but he's super young. And the guy's running a 4.2. So no receiver is going to be able to get over the top on him. And he has some shutdown skills. You got Siobhan Ravel, who's another big corner, who's also fast. I mean, you're talking about a guy who could run a 4.4 being over 6'2", and had he not got hurt, he may have been in the argument for the best cornerback in the draft. So some teams are going to draft him. He should be ready, at some point during the season. You probably can't expect him to start week 1, but by mid to late season, he's going to be a guy who could make an impact. You got Trey Amos, who's a very talented guy as well. Benjamin Morrison, who looked like a first-round pick before his injury. You have Thomas from Florida State, a very young guy who has all the potential to be a Pro Bowl shutdown corner. And then some last guys I'll bring up, Kaynen, some guys who could go second, third round. You got Darian Porter and Zach Frazier, 2 guys who I think are 6'2", 6'3", running 4.2, 4.3s. They compare very, comparably to Tyreek Woolen, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the league from Seattle, who has that 6'3", 6'4", with that crazy
long distance 4.2, 4.3 speed. And when you got a guy that big and that fast, if they can learn the technique of the position, you can be looking at one of the best guys. So, I think there's probably maybe 15 guys, Kaynen, who could go top 100 in the draft, and maybe even 5 or 6 guys who may go first round. So, very, very talented draft. And like I said, Kaynen, overall defensively, this is definitely a defensive heavy draft. The last position we have to break down, Kaynen, is the safety position. Another position that's definitely got some good quality guys that's definitely worth mentioning. 2 guys who are very, very super talented. But what are your thoughts, Kaynen, on this safety draft class?
Yeah, like you said, crazy good, really defensive heavy draft class, and obviously we're going to find some good safeties. I just got one guy, but that's Nick Emanwari. He's just a physical anomaly himself. I mean, he's a defensive back. I think he's 6'4", almost 230. That's just absolutely insane. And usually when you have guys that big, they're slow. This guy isn't slow at all. He has some serious speed. So to have that guy that big back there, I mean, that's going to help you in the run support so much if he breaks through that second level. That's going to be absolutely crucial. And not to mention he's a ball hawk. Why wouldn't you want a guy that can contest a deep ball without even jumping back there? I mean, I think he's my number one safety at the moment. There's a lot of other guys I like, but he was just such a standout. That's the guy I got going off the board, number 1 for the safeties.
Yeah, I got him going number 1 too, Kaynen, and it's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation with him and Malachi Starks. But Nick Emanwari is just so talented. I mean, you're talking about a guy over 6'3", at over 225 pounds, over 40-inch vertical, running a 4.3, 4.4. I mean, the guy is pretty much way bigger, way faster, and way stronger than Derwin James, who has been one of the best safeties in football since he's entered the league. I also saw that basically he's like a slightly smaller, slightly slower version of DK Metcalf, but he's playing on defense and the guy can cover. So, you're talking about a guy who could potentially be one of the best safeties in the league. He could also be like Kyle Hamilton, to where Kyle Hamilton has that size, but Kyle Hamilton runs a 4.4, 4.5. So he's a faster version of Kyle Hamilton, and he's bigger. And Kyle Hamilton just moves all over the field. So you're talking about a guy who, as I said before, could be the ultimate chess piece, who could be a linebacker, be a nickel corner, be a safety, and pretty much do it all. And maybe even in certain sub packages, rush the passer. So you're talking about a guy who could definitely do it all. And I definitely think with the way his physical attributes, along with how he's playing the football field over the last few years at South Carolina, he's got to be number 1. You also got Malachi Starks, who came in as a freshman and was already in the conversation as the best safety and pretty much stayed all that way. So he's definitely the guy who's got the better instincts. He's probably the guy who's got less bust potential, maybe not quite as talented, but just as a straight-up football player, is a great player. And he is one of the most talented safeties to come out. But when we compare him to Nick Emanwari, obviously maybe no safety in NFL history has ever been as talented as that guy. There's some other guys who second, third round picks I like. Xavier Watts, ball hawking guy who gets so many interceptions from Notre Dame. He's a guy who played a lot of years in college. He's going to be a 23, 24-year-old rookie. So he's a guy who could probably come right in and make an impact. Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State looked like a late first-round pick and then got hurt. He's got all the talent in the world, and if he could get healthy, he could be one of the best cover safeties in football. And then you got Andrew Mbuka, who could have came out last year as a second-round pick, returned, entered the transfer portal, and had the best season of his career. So he's a huge guy who's very talented, who I like as well. But that's going to do it for our draft preview, and that's going to do it for today's episode. Definitely make sure to be following us on all social medias at TFB Forecast ETB. Definitely be making sure to follow the YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. Make sure to help us get to that 1,000 subscriber mark, so definitely subscribe. Definitely check out our Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com for all kinds of sports content. Definitely listen to us however you listen to your podcast. And also the show is presented by Playback. So definitely stay tuned. He's Kaynen Buckshot. I'm Anthony Balester. And we'll catch you guys next week. See ya.